Hello everyone and welcome to another wire wrap tutorial. My name is Jim McIntosh. Today we're going to be making this beautiful ring. Now, there's something interesting about it. It isn't a typical ring. First of all, it's got a really big stone on it, but secondly, it's a two-finger ring. And it's an adjustable two-finger ring. And right here is the end of the ring shank right here. So this is a great ring, especially if you're making a lot of rings. I'm not a huge fan of making rings because you have to make so many sizes. So 99.9% of the rings I make, they're going to be adjustable rings. Now, there's something different about this one. Now, this one's a piece I made for my wife many years ago. She still wears this. It's got a great labradorite on it. I love the flash in this labradorite. But this has actually got an extra 2 wires in it. Because the stone was so big, I had to add 2 more prongs to it. We're not going to be doing that. We're going to actually be using a slightly smaller stone. It's still going to be a 2-finger ring, but it's only going to have 4 prongs on it. I added these 2 extra prongs to the center in between the 2 halves that we're going to be making. So, but we're going to be using a smaller stone. This one's a piece of dinosaur bone, and it's a little smaller, a little narrower, but it's going to be a good starter size for us. So let's get started with our project. So let's go just real quick over some of the things you're going to need for this. I'm going to be using 2 strands of 6 inches, these are each 6 inches long, 16 gauge square wire. 16 gauge square wire. If you look down in the description for this video, you'll be able to find a good resource for this. You can actually find it on my website now, so take a look over there. But these are 6 inches each. These are going to make up the prongs as well as the ring shank. And we talked just a second ago about the stone being smaller than the sample project that I showed you. This is 37 millimeters long, and it's about 20 millimeters wide. Now, you can use any stone that you'd like that does have some length to it. We just want something long enough that's going to be able to fit over 2 fingers and really be kind of a dramatic look to it. And so this is a pretty good sized stone. You can use, and I would prefer that you use, or at least start with, an oval stone like this. It's going to be much easier to set. But as you make these, you can experiment with different shapes of stones, different lengths, different widths, whatever makes you feel comfortable with. Once you get comfortable, whatever you can make with it, I really encourage it. Our tools are going to be just our regular basic tools that we use. There's a whole list of everything, the tools and the materials, down in the description below. Okay, so we got these wires relatively straight. So what we want to do now is we want to actually find the center of each of these strands of wire. So the strand is 6 inches long. So the center is going to be right at 3 inches. So we're going to take a fine tip permanent marker and we'll just mark that center of this 6-inch strand. We'll do the same thing with our second one as well. So we've got our center marked on each wire, and I'm going to take my WrapMaker pliers. And let me point something out. These aren't going to look exactly like your WrapMaker pliers, because what I've done is I've kind of turbocharged these. I added some tool magic to the tips of these, and I'm putting out a good, really nice video on why I'm putting the tool magic on here. But just take my word for it. This tool magic will really turbocharge your pliers. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take my WrapMakers and I'm going to just kind of divide this in half. So I'm going to put it at that mark, and I'll just bend it over the tool a bit to get it started, and then we're just going to continue to make a bend until we've made a nice point here. And I'm just going to use this WrapMaker pliers work great. They're really a nice substitute for flat nose pliers, and they can be used for that really, really well. So I've got it just like this, and I'm just going to kind of straighten it out a bit. Straighten it out some. And I'm going to do the same thing with the second wire set as well. Okay, so we've got both of our wire sets, and they're now bent in half, kind of nice curved point here. This is going to be the end of the ring shank right up here. What we need to do now is we need to mark each one of these where we're going to be wrapping the shank at, and we're going to do a cut and wrap like we always do. So I'm going to use millimeters on this particular one because it is a much more precise measurement. So from the tip, we're going to measure up these wire halves to 35 millimeters and make a mark. Okay, now move this mark down to your 0. And now from that mark, we're going to measure 12 millimeters. So 11, 12 is right there. We're going to do this with both halves. This is the area we're going to be filing some of the metal away and using it to wrap with. And if you're familiar with any of my videos, this is something I typically do for this style of wire wrapping. This prong set, I call it wire smithing. This is kind of what I do on every single piece. It gives some more security to the piece. So go ahead and measure and mark both pieces, and then we'll move on to going ahead and doing the cut and wrap. So we've got both halves. We've cut this area. It's now time to start our wrap. So to do that, what we're going to do is we're going to begin with one half of them, one of the halves of this. We're going to want to eventually incorporate both of these together in back to back with the cut sides facing out. We're going to wrap the two of them together. But to make things a little easier to do and so much less cumbersome, because it can be a little difficult, I want you to get your painter's tape, and I want you to just cut a couple of flags out of this. I call them flags, but just a couple of narrow, whoops, we're moving everything around here, just a couple of narrow pieces of tape, and set those aside because you're going to definitely need those in just a minute. So we've got two of them cut. And what we're going to do is we're going to begin with one half of this. So I want you to take your WrapMaker pliers, and I want you to hold the wire half here in the jaws. Now this is where you're going to really understand how it's turbocharged with this tool magic. This makes this so much, it doesn't move. It makes this a lot easier to hold the wire bundle, especially when we're talking about using larger gauge wire. And we're going to actually be using 18 gauge half round wire to do this wrapping with. And so remember, I cut some of this, I cut about an 8-inch piece of this off. And I want the flat side, that's the inside of that curve, is the flat side, and then the outside of that curve is the half round part of it. So I want to put this, line this up where I want to begin my wrap with the flat side against the, make adjustment there we go, with the flat side against the wire. We want to make sure we do that. And then all you do is just insert that wrap wire. Now that's another thing about adding this tool magic, is this is going to really, really hold this securely so that you can begin your wrap. Nothing moves, everything stays secure. So this tool magic really does a great job. And this was originally, we wanted to have some type of rubber on these pliers to make them a little easier to use. But it's impossible to have them manufactured that way. So we decided that this would probably be the best addition for these. So I've only made one wrap on here. So we can set our tools aside, and actually let me go ahead and set this one wrap in place so that it doesn't move around on us. So there we go. So we've got our wrap wire secured against the wrap. So we're going to take the second half, and I'm going to put it with the cut sides opposite one another. And I'm going to line up the bottoms. There we go. And then I'm going to take a piece of that painter's tape that we just cut, and I'm going to apply it, just outside of that cut area that we're going to wrap. We don't want this, we don't want to wrap over the tape. And I'm just going to tightly bring this around. And this is just, you know, I always use this painter's tape kind of as additional hands, just so that I don't really have a difficult time with the piece. I want everything to be easy. I hate doing things the hard way. So we're doing this the easy way. I'm going to take another piece of painter's tape. I'm going to do the same thing, but I'm going to do go to the bottom end where we started, and I'm just going to just outside that wrap area. I am going to, oops, the tape decided it did not want to stick. Here we go. So I'm just going to bring that tape around there. Now everything is nice and secure. We can now finish wrapping, and we're going to wrap both halves together. So watch as I bring this wrap wire around. And you want to kind of tightly do this. So make sure that each wrap is firm. And as you go, about every 2 or 3 wraps, go ahead and just press it up against the piece just to make sure everything stays squared up. And we're just going to wrap these together till we get to the other side. And I told you to do something, and then I didn't do it myself. So here, let me go back and make sure that I do this. There we go. And we're going to continue on until we get to the opposite side of this. And we probably got one more wrap I need to do. Now, I'm not going to cut all of this wrap wire off. I am going to trim it ever so slightly so that there's about 1 inch, because what we want to do is we want to tuck this wire end in between the 2 halves, and we'll do that in a few minutes. But right now we want to make sure that we get all of this done, and we'll do the same thing here. We're going to tuck it in between there just so that it doesn't scratch anybody. All right, so now that we've got these 2 halves wrapped together, you can remove this tape. Everything should be nice and securely put together. So you can take your tape and get rid of the tape. Now, this one might be a little harder because I got to find the end. Isn't that how it always goes? There we go. Get it started here. Take our tape off, because what we want to do now is we want to actually, these bent ends here, we want to shape those into the ring shank. Okay, so to do that, I want you to take your WrapMaker pliers, and I want you to just grab one of the tips, and we're just going to bend it, oops, right here at the end. We're just going to make a little bend, just like that. We're going to do the same thing over here. We're going to just make a slight outward bend so that they're facing in opposite directions. And now we want to make this into a ring shank. So I'm going to be using my ring mandrel. This is my steel ring mandrel. And you want to make these about the size that you're going to be making this ring. About. Because remember, this is an adjustable ring. So it can be, you want it to be close to what you want, but remember, you can adjust it larger or smaller. So I'm going to make both my halves about a size 6. And I'm just going to hold the bent area that I got on the 6. And I'm just going to kind of roll it around the mandrel. And then I'm going to go up here a little bit higher. And I'm going to just keep making this bend. Remember, we can always bend it back the opposite direction. And then, so now I've got this close to where I want it. And I'm going to, and you may even just take like a rawhide mallet and just tap it against here. Now notice the 6 is way down here. I've moved up because you want to make sure you get this to be a nice tight curve. Okay, so now what I can do is, now that I've got it a nice tight curve around here, I can now just kind of move this up to a size 6 there. And we can set that aside. Whoops, dropping stuff here. Set that mandrel aside. See, and so now we've got this about the size we want. And you'll notice my wife's fingers are very small, so hers, notice there, it's kind of similar to what we've got here. Okay, and do the same thing over here with this side. Actually, you know what you can do is, since we've made this bend, we can take this piece of wrap wire, the wrap wire end, and you can kind of put this guy down in between these two halves, and we're going to trim it. So this is where we started everything. So I want to trim this so that it is in between these. And then I like to take some of these chain nose pliers that I have here, and I kind of like to work that end into the center. I don't want it to, first of all, I don't want it to come loose. Second of all, I don't want it to pinch anyone. And we're going to do the same thing with this little wire end here once we make the split here. So let's go ahead and we'll bend this second half, and I'll show you what we get. So this is what we have. This is just kind of a basic shape for these ring shanks here. We're going to make some adjustments here, or you can make some adjustments. Maybe yours looks better than mine does, but I just want to make sure I want to get these done correctly. So what's left is really to make the prongs for this. Now, you want to remember that you've got these set up with 2 sets of these on each side. So you want to separate them, and you want to make sure that you're separating the right ones. So you want each half to go the opposite direction. So let me see if I got the right half. Okay, so what you do is just separate them. Separate the 2 halves, and then you want to bring them out to a 45-degree angle from the center, because what we're going to do is we're going to set the stone on each one of these. So we're going to bring them out, and you want to bring this section out too, so that each of these are at 45 degrees approximately. We're going to get a final, we'll do a final measurement and everything once we get everything where we want it. Okay, so this is what it's looking like. My 45 degrees is not all that great, but here's where we are. So now what we need to do is we need to set this on the stone. But before we do that, I want to take that center wire, this wire end, should I say, and I want to put it in the middle, just like that, and then I want to trim it. And I'm going to take, just like we did in the bottom, so I trim that off, and then I'm going to take some chain nose pliers, and I'm going to push it into the center of this setting so that it is out of the way and does not bother anyone. So this is what we've got. And kind of play a little bit around with that just to make sure we're all set up. There we go. So now let's go ahead and we'll put it on the stone, and we'll start measuring each of the prongs so that we can set the stone in place. So we've got these all separated out. Now something I forgot to point out is after you get them all bent out, you can also just kind of take the prong setting, set it upside down, and then just kind of push it against your work surface like this, Just give it a little push. That will flatten everything out to make this much easier to work with. Now, what we want to do is we want to be able to take the stone and center the stone on here and then determine where we're going to be making our prongs for each one of these. So notice if I turn it to the side, this is kind of what we're looking like here. But this is a cabochon with a round top, and it's going to be very cumbersome. So what you need to do is take the top of your stone and make sure you're on your work surface in an area that's not going to really hurt your stone very much, but set it down in front of you. And what I've done is I've taken a length of painter's tape and I've cut this just kind of narrow here. And what I'm going to do, if it cooperates, what I'm going to do is I'm going to actually just tape it to my work surface. That will hopefully prevent it from moving around on me and allow me to center this. So now I can center this on my stone, and you can kind of work your way around it. I want to get my prongs so they're kind of towards the end of the stone here. That's going to hold them much better in place. So we got those there, and I got those there. That looks like it's probably going to be about right. Just want to make sure. Now, see, I'm not in the middle of the stone. But what we want to do is just kind of work with it. It's not impossible to do. And once you're satisfied with where your prongs are, I want you to take a fine tip permanent marker. And what we're going to do is we are going to mark each of these right where it comes out from the cabochon. I'm going to go all the way to all 4 prongs. And when we do the other side, just be careful not to move things around. So hopefully I didn't move things around. I did move things around. Okay, there. Oh, come on now. All right. And then we're going to do this prong. And then this final prong here. And we can always make adjustments to this as we go. But that's kind of gives you the idea as to where we're going to make these bends in our prongs. So now you can remove your stone from your work surface. And we're going to use these marks. And we're going to bend, so my marks are on the bottom of each of these prongs. So we're going to bend it away from our ring shanks. So take your WrapMaker pliers and just outside of each of those marks, position them and then bend this outside portion away from you. So here's our ring shank. We're going to go away from the ring shank, so it's going to be away from us, and just make a bend. So you see what we've done is we've bent this away. Now I want you to notice that where this prong is positioned, this ring shank is in the wrong place. So I'm going to make this just ever so smaller, each one of these. Just going to kind of bend them out of the way, and we can reshape these and reform each of those in just a minute. But this is what we've got. I've bent my prong away from me, away from the ring shank. I'm going to do that same thing on all 4 of these prongs. There's 2, and then where's this one at? Oh, there it is. There's 3. And here is number 4. Now, we want to test this to see if it fits properly. So, set our stone in. And what we're looking for is we're looking to make sure that it is seated. Now, things have moved, so it's not exactly flat. All right, so things are kind of in the right place. These prongs are good. This prong is good. It's this one right here is not good. It's too long. So what do you do? Well, I'm going to show you. So I'm going to place my WrapMakers right here at the bend, and I'm going to squeeze it. And what that does is it kind of unbends it a little bit. And then I'm going to reposition these to where I really want the bend. And I'm going to make my bend, and then everything should straighten out. Okay, so let's see how that is. Ah, there we go. See, so now if you look at it from the side, the flat part of the cabochon is now sitting where I want each one of these. So now you can take each prong and push it over the stone, just like that. See, now you can take a look at it from the side. Of course, we've got some adjustments to make. Got a couple of just a little minor things. But if you work with this, it's a very simple project. So let's move on to marking or cutting our prongs and get everything finally set. So this is what we've got so far. We've got all of our prongs kind of over the piece. And I want to kind of go around, and I want to make sure that each of these are kind of squared up. Now, be very careful with this because you don't want to nick your stone. And all I'm doing is I'm just going to see, I just flattened this up against the stone. And just want to make sure that everything is where you want it. It's around the stone how you want. Okay, this one's kind of wonky here. So let's fix that. That is a technical term, wonky. So we've got our prongs kind of where we want them. So now what we need to do is we need to trim these. Now we're not trimming them all the way off. Kind of want to leave them just slightly long. But what I want to do is I just want to cut it just above the stone. That's too much, but let's see. Let me show you. Here we go. You just want to cut it just barely above the stone, if you can see that. So we'll trim that off, and you want to now do the same with all the others, and you want to try and get them all even. And I want to make sure this one is not cooperating fully. So there we go. And you want to kind of get each of these the same length. Okay. And now this one, again, not cooperating. There. Kind of moved out of place. There. Well, that one really is not acting right. There we go. And kind of even with the other one. Now remember, when you're trimming these, leaving it too long is just fine because you can always trim. But if you cut it too short, you can't add more wire. It's impossible. So what we're going to do is we're going to trim each of these so that they will fit on here well. And then the last one, we will trim it there. And you can take your stone out. And again, this is where we want to kind of make some adjustments, make sure we're in the right spots here. Okay. I think we are. So for this one, that ring shank is just not there. There. So now you've got these jagged edges on here. What we want to do is we want to use a shaping disc. It's kind of a diamond cutting wheel polisher that I have. You can get them. There's a link below in the description where you can get these. But really, what they are is they're just something that's going to polish, but also cut away some of this and give us some shape. So we want to shape it. Now, if you don't have one, you can use a small needle file to do the shaping. All we're doing is we want to round this off to make it easier, easier to feel on the top of the stone. Okay. All right, so I've got my rotary tool here, and in it is that polisher, that cutting and polishing disc. This is a used one. I've been using this one for a while. This is what they look like brand new, and they're kind of a little rubbery type piece with some diamond encrusted into it so that it does cut and polish. And all I'm going to do is I'm going to use this to shape the tips of each of these prongs so that they will feel better on the top of the stone so they don't cut and snag you. So let's turn our rotary tool on, and we're going to shape this. And I'm going to show you how to shape one prong, and then I'll do all the rest of them off camera. All I'm doing is just shaping this, kind of rounding it off, taking a little bit of the bulk out of that prong. And then I'm also going to be mindful of taking just the sharp edge off. So if you can see, I've kind of changed the shape of this. I've rounded that so that it's just going to hold on like just a nail on there, on the stone. All right, now I'm going to go ahead and do the rest of them here off camera. Okay. All right, so we've got our prongs shaped, and they're looking pretty good. And I've got everything kind of squared up. It's all looking good here. So now what I can do is I can just set my stone in there, and we'll take a look and see how things are. We may have to adjust things a little. Looks like we're right about where we want to be on each of these. So now all that's really left to do is to set the stone. So if you take your pliers and you want to do this, so let me explain. What we're going to do is we're going to do this prong, we're going to bend it against the stone, then we're going to work opposites and go to this prong here and bend it, and then this one, bend it, this one, bend it. We're doing it in opposites so that it keeps everything centered. We want to make sure we keep the stone centered here with everything else. So let's start with our first one, and we're just going to, I'm going to position it, this bottom jaw here underneath it, and then I'm going to take the top jaw and I'm going to put it right at the tip of that, and I'm just going to kind of rock it over. So I'm doing this kind of motion here where I'm rocking that on there. So that's got it up against the stone. Now we're going to go opposite. We're going to do the same thing. Put it underneath on the prong, put the other tip at the top of the prong, and kind of just rock it onto there. Another thing that's good about having this tool magic on your pliers is that it's not going to scratch the stone if it slips, but you don't want it to slip. So let's do our third prong. This one's not cooperating. See, it's not cooperating. Come on, you. I think it might be my angle on here. Huh. What? There we go. There we go. He just was not cooperating. And then the final one. Push that onto the stone, and you want to make sure you've got them all spaced where you want them. They're all kind of pointing the same direction to the middle, and there is what you have. So you've got your ring. Now you can go ahead and you can put your ring mandrel back on here, and you can adjust the size to what you want. Let's kind of make this a bigger piece here. See, I'm just going to move the mandrel, move the ring down the mandrel. See, made that bigger. And we can do the other side, same thing. And the good thing about having this heavier gauged wire on here, the 16 gauge, is it makes it a much stiffer ring. So there is our finished dinosaur bone prong 2-finger ring. Hope you enjoyed this. Thank you for coming by, and remember, practice, practice, practice.